Hey, welcome. This presentation is entitled The History of Native Math and Science, and today I'll be your guest lecturer. My name is Dr. Kent Blansett. I'm the Langston Hughes Associate Professor of Indigenous Studies and History at the University of Kansas. I come from 5 tribes, so I'm Cherokee Creek, Choctaw, Shawnee, and Potawatomi descendant. I come from 3 family lines, that of the Blanket, Panther, and of course the quintessential Indian name, Smith, is also in my family line. One of the things that is absolutely fascinating that we see kind of pivotal in all throughout ancient North America is the spiral design. This is a spiral design that came from Petroglyph National Park, which is just outside of Albuquerque, New Mexico. But the spiral design we can see in multiple places all through native North America. If you look to the bottom here, you can see a picture of Serpent Mound. And Serpent Mound was an effigy mound. So it was made to look like a snake. And this far opening over here is the mouth of the snake opening up to consume an egg. And at the very back end, you can see then the tail. And that tail is in that serpentine design, this coiling design. Now, there's one particular serpent that really is reflective of this movement of the end of the tail, and that's the rattlesnake. And the rattlesnake is really important because the rattlesnake has to do with agriculture. And of course, you can see the snake eating the egg has to do with fertility. So out of this, even for us as Cherokee, we have stomp dances. And these stomp dances are coordinated from sundown all the way till sun up. We use 7 different woods that relate to at least the 7 directions. You have a caller, which is your person who calls out. And then you have men and women dancing together in which they then respond to the caller and they repeat and echo the song of the caller. And out of this, the women also do something interesting. The women wear these turtle shells or rattles on their legs. And so when they dance, they make this and that sound is important because what that sound symbolizes is it symbolizes rain. And you can't have fertility, you can't have crops, you can't have life without rain, without water. In other words, what we have here is a highly evolved system. And it relates to this spiraling design. Spiral, if you were to break it down into mathematics, there's a principle with a spiral, and it's called the Fibonacci sequence. And you can see the sequence here, which is kind of adding a number as you go. So 1, and then you'd have another 1, which would equal 2. If you add them together, you add another 1 to that, it becomes 3. You add at least 2 to the 3, it becomes 5. You add the 3 to the 5, it becomes 8, and so on and so forth. And when you chart that out, it makes a perfect spiral. And this spiral is the composition of life. It is the DNA helix. It is the galaxy. It is the Milky Way, as you can see here. It is also the center of plants and plant life as we know it. It's how storms circulate like hurricanes. They circulate in that spiral formation. Now, the spiral also is something unique. It tells us a written history. And one of the ways that it tells us a written history is I had a chance to be able to have a conversation with one of our leading architects, a Zleta Pueblo citizen by the name of Ted Hahola, who teaches architecture at the University of New Mexico. Ted Hahola told us a story about every year at Zleta, at least tribal leaders will then recite all the different places where Zleta had moved sequentially over thousands of years. And what's interesting is how they're able to tell that story is they're using a written form of dating technology. And that dating technology involves a spiral. So what he did is he said, what you have to do is you can't look at the spiral design, at least in this rock art, as one-dimensional. You have to look at things, at least in Indian country, through a 3-dimensional lens. And what you need to do is think of it like a phone cord, like the slide shows over here. You have to extend that phone cord out, and once you do that, it shows layers. And those layers can be counted. And it's the counting of those layers that is maintained by these societies of Pueblo elders that enables them to be able to rechart thousands of years of different places of where the Zleta people have lived over time. Other ideas or other principles of architecture involving astronomy that relates to these the significance of native math and science are found in 2 major places in native North America. There is Cahokia, which was one of the largest cities in the world. So at the time of 1100, well before the arrival of Europeans, this city had over 30,000 people that were a part of this city. So it was larger than Jerusalem. It was larger than London at that time. And of course, out of this, they created these really complex systems because they had to understand nature around them. And part of that understanding is that if you know where Cahokia is, it's outside of modern day St. Louis. So I always encourage people, if you happen to go to St. Louis, go to Cahokia Mounds and check it out. It is an amazing site because it is one of the largest native cities in North America at the time. And what they constructed there is not only one of the largest cities, which they had these earthen mounds like Monk's Mound, which has a circumference larger than the pyramids in Giza in Egypt, but they also constructed Woodhenge. And you can see that behind me here. And it looks like just what it is, a series of wooden posts that are put up in a circle that then have pathways carved behind them. What we begin to realize is astronomers began tracking this, and just like what we talked about, how you view the sun moving on the equinox, this acted as a calendar, because when the sun came into contact with each of those posts, it told a certain date within the calendar. And what this was important for is they had to know, with 30,000 people outside of St. Louis, when to plant, when to harvest. And hopefully maybe they just get 2 harvests in and they're able to feed and sustain that large of a population at the time. And the reason why that's really important, there's 2 rivers there. So there's the Missouri River and the Mississippi River. Both of these rivers are notorious for flooding. And of course, if they flood, you lose everything. So you had to be critically engaged in figuring out the planting season during this time period. The other thing too that they have is earthquakes. New Madrid Fault, when it erupted, made the Mississippi run backwards back in 1813. So out of this, what happens at Cahokia? There's earthquake, there's natural disaster. The people of Cahokia are us. It was an intertribal city. And of course, we began to spread out. We formed smaller communities afterwards. But we see this technology replicated again. And down below here is Bighorn Medicine Wheel. Now, Bighorn Medicine Wheel sits up on a bluff. And on that bluff, it basically charts out, just like Woodhenge, through these cairns or these large pilings of rocks in this circle, it charts out the movements of the sun on the elliptical. And so even for those who were native nations on the northern plains, they were using the similar technology of what was in Cahokia. In other words, what we begin to see is a science replicated and shared among many different indigenous peoples. Now, using what Ted Hohola told us about the spiral design or the Fibonacci sequence, we have to also look at Woodhenge. We have to look at the Bighorn Medicine Wheel in a 3-dimensional viewpoint. And if you do that, you then create a conical shape. So you rise that midpoint up and it creates a cone, or much like an inipi or a teepee or a lodge in and of itself. That lodge is also seen as a star. We'll talk a little bit more about that and its importance. But it related to a really critical ceremony of the Great Plains, which was the Sundance tradition. And what was integral among the Plains nations was this need for and this harvest of the buffalo. It sustained our economies, it sustained our people, both culturally and through ceremony, spiritually, physically, intellectually, as a sustaining force. So out of this, we have the Sundance ceremony. Now, Sundancers oftentimes would wear at least a sunflower as a medallion around their necks. The sunflower, as you can see from this slide, has an important property. As a plant, it's one of the few plants that its head actually follows the elliptical of the sun throughout the day. So no matter where the sun is in the sky, every sunflower points its head towards the sun and moves and follows the sun. So this is the reason why Sundancers wear those sunflowers. Also, for the buffalo loved sunflowers, right? They would actually get the oil from the seeds onto their horns, and it would make them look really pretty. And this was one way that they would be able to attract a mate, to sustain life, and to be able to create more buffalo, was they depended upon at least the seeds of that plant of the sunflower. So what we have is essentially a ceremony that connects the buffalo, that connects the sunflower, that then connects it to the survivance of Native peoples. And as you can see in this far slide, this is where one connects themselves physically then to at least the cottonwood tree, which oftentimes is at least brought into the center of the arena by men. And then the arbor of that arena is constructed by women and children. So it's about the genders coming together to create life and sustain life once a year, replicating also the constellations in the sky. So the people are essentially mirroring what is in the heavens. They're mirroring it also on earth as well.